Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Marcy Markusa, and today we are talking crime, retail crime, youth involvement, and bail reform. All of it factors into our discussions today. This is Manitoba. It is regrettable that we're talking about crime, but our question today is, what are the solutions that can make citizens safer in Winnipeg? And to try and seek some of the answers to that question, we're going to take you through one story that developed in Winnipeg. So the story I'm talking about is a story that was described as violent and brazen. Winnipeg police say they were shocked to learn that 4 teenagers were involved in such a violent, brazen, armed robbery that happened at a busy Unicity Walmart in the city of Winnipeg. So police say the teenagers involved were between the ages of 13 and 17. They were all caught taking backpacks into the store, stuffing them with items from the shelves. Now, when confronted by security staff, one of the teams allegedly pulled out a gun and fired, narrowly missing the guard's head. Police say luckily it was a CO2 air gun. No one was hurt. All of the teenagers were arrested. Now, Inspector Max Waddell is the first interview we're going to hear on the podcast today. He's with the Winnipeg Police Service. He spoke about his concerns and this case with CBC's Faith Fundal.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Inspector, you describe these youth as misguided and lost, but you also said the motive for the majority of your retail theft cases aren't for survival. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my 32 years of policing, I have obviously been exposed to a lot of investigations and a lot of crime, and I'm very in tune with the officers I work with. And I'm hearing one consistent message, that when we do apprehend individuals, whether they're youth or adults, for these types of crimes, they're not saying they are stealing for survival because they need a loaf of bread or they need a jug of milk. That's not what's being stolen here. What's being stolen is high-value items that can be easily turned around in the illicit community to either buy illicit drugs, buy firearms. It's a monetary value that is in the underground market right now. And I truly believe the majority, and not in all cases, the majority is being used for illicit means for further gain.
Why do you think it's important for the public to appreciate that nuance, that difference in I'm stealing because I'm hungry versus I'm stealing because I want the things to be sold and that money to be used elsewhere?
Well, I think if people better understand the true landscape, they will be more supportive for change. And I truly believe that we need to put pressure on our federal government to make changes with the Criminal Code of Canada to hold those who continually, repeatedly break the law responsible for these heinous acts.
And part of that is what you're describing as organized crime. What do you mean when you say that organized crime is at play here?
Well, the amount of shoplifting that goes on daily, weekly, monthly, yearly is a staggering number. And I don't believe for one second that these are just a bunch of single individuals that are committing these acts. We have conducted investigations in the past. We have talked to individuals who have been arrested before. We have ways to gather information and intelligence. And what we've learned from that is that groups are organizing adults' use to commit these acts so that they will not be held accountable. And they're using these individuals to further propel their goals and gains ahead by selling these products, getting the money, whether it's buying illicit drugs or other stolen items.
To be clear, do you believe the youth here that have been charged are victims of organized crime?
I do to a certain degree. I don't have any evidence to say or prove that, but the fact that there was 4 of them, that they went in with a firearm, it tells me that this is just not 4 kids that were on the couch, just all of a sudden stood up and said, hey, we're just going to go steal some candy here.
And so is then this part of a gang initiation or some version of that?
Well, I can't say in this particular situation. I worked 10 years in organized crime. That does go on for sure, where there are gang initiations. But I don't have any proof specifically to this particular incident.
Jessica and Angel has lived in the area for almost 20 years. Here is what she told CBC.
There's always fights. There's always heavy cop presence. There's always groups of people that, you want to wait to get out of your car until they move along. We don't come, even my 7-year-old son wants to come and get pop or whatever in the night, and nope, like after 8:30, forget it. Like, he's not coming here to shop.
Is that what you think is okay for folks to feel? I mean, I'm hearing that she is scared. I'm not sure what the word is. Is that okay?
It's not okay. And sadly, that is the reality of what is going on in the city of Winnipeg today. Whether it's downtown, whether it's in the suburb areas, it is happening in all neighborhoods throughout the entire city of Winnipeg. And what this lady has stated is true. And we all need to be vigilant when we're out and about, because these acts of violence and these crimes are just unpredictable. There's no really method or structure behind them. It's a chance of opportunity, and they seize on that.
So how do you deal with that then? What is the police service doing to arrest and successfully prosecute the heads of these organized crime groups, or the people who are doing this?
So that would be a two-part answer. First and foremost, we are very much an intelligence-led police service where we look at crime statistics and we deploy accordingly.
Right, so you don't just randomly send folks places and make arrests right away.
We do not. That's why we were already in the area at Unicity, because we've identified that area as an area that has had significant challenges as of late. And thankfully we were there, because we all know if we weren't there, it could have escalated even further. The second part, what police are doing, whether it's locally through the Manitoba Association of Chiefs of Police or the Canadian Associations of Chiefs of Police, we're lobbying the federal government to make changes to the criminal code that will prevent individuals who repeatedly commit crimes from getting bail. And this is the ultimate goal, to prevent this from happening.
And just for folks who might not fully appreciate which part of the code you're talking about here, what does it say now that has been challenging for police, and what are you hoping that is changed?
Well, with the Bail Reform Act, if the individual meets certain thresholds regarding the crimes that they have committed, that allows the magistrate or the justices of the peace to release these individuals back into the community rather than hold them in an incarcerated state. And, I don't think anyone thinks that the jail is the ultimate solution to solving crime. But what jail does do is it prevents those who refuse to not commit crimes from committing further crimes, and keeps all of us safe.
Are you finding the people who have been arrested are recommitting crimes?
That is a large majority. The old saying goes is that 10% of our population causes us 90% of our problems. And that's truly what's going on here.
Is there another part of this, as you've described it, so overwhelming cases of shoplifting and retail theft for your members that you think needs to be addressed? We've talked about the laws that you're hoping will be changed. What else are we missing here, do you think?
Well, I think what we're missing is the emotional and mental impact on all of us. From the police officers who had to engage in this situation, they are faced with an individual that's holding a firearm. That is a very stressful situation, because we could be put into a position where we now have to use lethal force.
And your members have experienced that too.
There's been many, many cases, and unfortunately, we just want to stop the threat. That is our ultimate goal. We don't want to take anyone's life, and any officer that has had to do that in the past, it's a terrible experience, not only for them, for their family, and the individuals involved. It's just very, very compounding to everyone that's being involved in this. Think of the innocent bystanders that were walking in and out of that business that day. They were exposed to all this, and I can tell you that would have affected them. They would go, "This is a very scary situation."
I know that what stood out to many folks were how old these suspects were, 13 to 17. How do you stop this? If the things that you're calling for don't change, how do you stop this?
Well, I am a big believer of having a balanced approach to all this. And one of the approaches is it can't just all be an enforcement arm. That is not going to work along. We need to do more education for our youth, and we need to spend more time with them. You know, I've heard through other media outlets that they're talking about, well, where are the parents? I don't know specifically with these youth, but I know how I was raised, and I was raised with parents who made sure that I was on the up and up and that I was being guided and taught properly about what the difference between right and wrong.
Right.
And sadly, I don't think all of today's youth have that in their lives. So we need to fill that gap by providing mentorship to them.
Who is responsible for that, do you think?
I'm sorry, which part?
When you talk about we need to fill those gaps, who is responsible for that? Is it government? Is it police service? Is it parents? From your unique lived experience and frame, who do you think needs to step up?
Well, I think who needs to step up in that instance is who has responsibility and care for that individual. So if it's parents, if the child has two parents, it's on them. But if they're in care for the province or Child and Family Services or whatever the situation may be, it would be that agency. It's most certainly not the police's responsibility. We need to be at the table and we need to help, but we're not the parents of the child.
Inspector, thank you for coming in to talk about this.
Thank you for your time.
That was Inspector Max Waddell of the WPS speaking with CBC's Faith Fundal yesterday. Waddell also was talking about changes and bail reform. The mayor's talking about it too. Mayor Scott Gillingham, in conversation with the Winnipeg Free Press, says, quote, this is right from the Free Press, our journalistic colleagues here. It's time for every part of the justice system to start prioritizing the safety of the public and not the criminals. We need a change to the laws. We need bail and sentencing reform that makes our community safer. So the mayor weighing in conversation with the Winnipeg Free Press. We want to talk about this, our way forward, with Michael Weinrath, criminology professor at the University of Winnipeg. He's here via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So let's first, before we talk about bail reform, let's talk about what we heard Inspector Max Waddell saying, that in his view, this crime is for capital gain and not for necessity or survival. What is your take on that and reaction to this?
Yes, well, I mean, I think we've seen a significant increase in shoplifting and retail robbery, if you will, over the last few years, right? Like it's been a precipitous rise. And what you have happening, I think, in those sorts of situations is, well, there's two things, right? So there's groups of people who are talking about this sort of shoplifting, right? It's not a lot of individuals waking up one day and saying, well, I think I'll go, shoplift and see what I can get away with, right? So what we call sort of a subcultural effect. So there's a lot of individuals sort of reinforcing each other. And then at a secondary level, you have people who start organizing these individuals. And a lot of the people who are doing the shoplifting are people with mental health challenges, addiction issues, trying to get their money for the next fix. And so, there's people who are organizing these groups. They're selling this property. You can always find people who want to get some items for cheap, partly, because certainly we've seen the cost of living increase quite dramatically. So you have a market for these sorts of things. So I tend to agree with the police at this point. Then again, I mean, you have different levels, right? I mean, you do have people who are, committing these offenses just for small financial gain, but a lot of that is driven by individuals who can organize, a stolen property market.
I want to talk about how they organize around young people. I mean, we had two 13-year-olds here involved, the ages 13 to 17. Teens, the Winnipeg Police Service says the crimes were organized and teens may have been directed to commit the thefts, to complete the thefts. What does that say about youth crime? And when that happens, we heard... you might have heard the full interview, my colleague Faith Fundal asking, is this initiation into a larger gang, or is this just using young people because they're likely to stay to stay out of from being behind bars, and so they can just use them to fuel activity? Like, what's your sense of young people being involved directly like that potentially here?
Yes, I mean, this is sort of a new old
Yep.
type of strategy by people certainly in the gangs. And, now we're seeing it in sort of the organized theft. Really, we often sort of see some of these really extreme violent offenses by youth trying to earn entrance into the gang. Uh, this now is, again, as you're suggesting, a strategy of involving people, young people, because they know that the young people are more or less likely to be released. Kind of ironic in a way, because the mayor is talking about bail reform. The older offenders, they know that they also have a good chance of not being released when they're arrested. So they're trying to exploit young people. And again, I started out, in this business years ago, working with young offenders in, a group home type setting. And, again, they're very vulnerable. They think this stuff is exciting. They're trying to impress people who seem to have money
Hmm.
in their neighborhood, the cool, offenders, or sometimes it can be family members, and they're young people and they think that they're indestructible. But one of the things I did want to mention that seems to be forgotten in this story is that police responded, and you had a young person with a firearm. And the police have come under, tremendous criticism for overreacting and not de-escalating situations. And they managed that situation, without anyone getting seriously hurt.
There,
So,
there,
I think the police deserve some credit for that.
There's a couple things to build on here out of what you said, and we also have another clip of Inspector Waddell as well that I want to get to. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, people might have heard me when you're saying this is sort of a new old thing. The reason you maybe heard me say "yup" is because we years ago were talking about youth being involved and older offenders targeting youth to do different things for a crime and criminal activity. And this was like around Central Park. This was like 20 years ago. So this feels very similar with activity. But I want to build on what you said about bail reform and what the mayor has said about this, because in this case, we do know that the 17-year-old who was boy was charged with armed robbery using a firearm and 2 counts. We understand of failing to comply with an offense order. So previously, and had a warrant for failure to comply with a sentencing order. The 15-year-old also had previous incidents, additional arrests, and so I think bail reform, while as you rightly point out, that usually that would be the older offenders we're talking about. In this case, perhaps is applicable. But what is your sense of whether or not bail reform could actually make a difference? Because people hold it up as something that is needed. I'm just curious about your sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a mugs game now, right? I mean, you just wait and somebody commits a crime and people check to see if they're on parole or if they're on probation or if they were released on a bail order and are saying, hey, see, this part of the system's not working. People are going to be involved in the system, and there will be some people who reoffend on various forms of supervision. So again, I think you have to look at, proportionately, how significant is that, and how much crime do you think you're really stopping? So I think the idea of bail reform, the Youth Criminal Justice Act, came in back in the around 2002, 2003, and youth crime was dropping significantly. And people were concerned that it was harder to lock up young people with the Youth Criminal Justice Act. But, the crime rate went down in Manitoba as well as in other provinces. And so nobody was, concerned about all these release provisions until recently. And we've had a spate of an increase in crime. And so, we have a lot of youth who end up involved with the criminal justice system. And, we've been relatively successful over a number of years in getting those people back out of the system. So, locking up a lot more youth. And again, youth is a little bit different, right, than adults. Locking up a lot more youth more consistently is not necessarily the answer. And I mean, some of it, is again, the police and the Crown, they have to build these cases where they think it's going to be obvious that these individuals will reoffend.
I think that people just draw that straight line and say if someone is reoffending, if they were held, they wouldn't be out to reoffend. Why is it not that simple?
Well, I mean, I think that often people are released, and they end up staying out of trouble. But again, nobody remembers those things, right? I mean, and again, it's a cause effect thing, right? People say, "Oh, this horrible crime happened. How could we have prevented it?" Well, if they weren't on bail or whatever, or any other order, people can't really point at that. But if that's there, then people, the simplistic thing is, oh, well, if they hadn't been on, bail, then that never would have happened.
Let's
So
move
let's
to
eliminate bail.
let's move to other preventative measures that are potentially possible here. So 8:23 a.m. Michael Weinrath on with us, criminology professor at the University of Winnipeg. This is Inspector Waddell. He also had this to say. This goes beyond policing. Have a listen.
They're talking about, well, where are the parents? I don't know specifically with these youth, but I know how I was raised, and I was raised with parents who made sure that I was on the up and up and that I was being guided and taught properly about what the difference between right and wrong.
Right.
And sadly, I don't think all of today's youth have that in their lives. So we need to fill that gap.
What's your response to that, Inspector Waddell, talking about needing to fill a gap for kids who are vulnerable for various reasons?
Yes, I mean, I think he's correct. Again, this is sort of a new old. I mean, ever since people started talking about juvenile delinquency, people would be fingering the parents. And again, it's true. A lot of these kids come from very disadvantaged backgrounds. Sometimes they're kids in care. And so supports for those kids, and also supports for some of the families. We have people in impoverished circumstances, and they need some help. It would be nice to see, in cases of, some of our disadvantaged minorities, that more of our First Nations leaders were able to get involved and provide some support and advice on different forms of support for families.
And I haven't confirmed, by the way, I don't have it in front of me. We don't have a lot of detail about the full backgrounds, as you said, histories and identities of the youth involved. I do wonder if this is correct, that youth crime in Canada is on the decline. You said that earlier in our conversation, but in Winnipeg,
on decline.
Oh, pardon me. Okay, is it right that we though are different in Winnipeg? That in there other places it's still in decline and we're on the rise here? Like,
I'd have to go back check the stats, but really there was a national decline of significance until right around COVID, and it actually has picked up in most recent years.
Okay.
And Manitoba, we're always a bit of an outlier for serious violence. So, for example, some of the youth homicides in recent years are not seen in the rest of the country.
Where do we go from here then, in your view, in Manitoba, with this to... Where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, I think I would agree that, we need, two sorts of approaches. And I agree with the police that a lot of that is resources and just putting people on the street and people, back in the offices. And that's identifying people who are committing these thefts, working through your informant networks, gathering evidence, getting warrants, and identifying the ringleaders and prosecuting some of those individuals. Now, having said that, I was pleased recently there were some arrests of some people who are fairly prolific shoplifters, but there was also restorative justice referrals. And so again, let's try to identify individuals who maybe don't need to be incarcerated and would get some support. And otherwise, for the youth who are involved, some of them may have to be arrested and some of them may not be ready to be released without significant supports. And then on the prevention side, let's, identify some of the families that are experiencing, difficulty and try to provide supports for them.
Thank you very much for the interview today. Obviously, longer than our usual interview, but so many issues to cover here that are really prevalent and top of mind for people all over Winnipeg specifically as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Michael Weinrath is a criminology professor at the University of Winnipeg. Well, that is our podcast for today. Thanks for leaning in and giving us a listen. And if you are new to the podcast, a special welcome. And remember that you can find This is Manitoba anywhere you get your podcasts. We drop new episodes every Friday.